Welcome to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere, Inc., a company based in Florida. Hosted by Michael John Sullivan, this is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Now, here is Michael John Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to Magical Books for Kids. I'm Michael John Sullivan. Again, thank you for joining us for another podcast. This podcast is updated every Wednesday. It's free on all platforms. We're excited to have children's author Donna Howard. She graduated from Whitworth University with a degree in elementary education. A lifelong bibliophile, she enjoys reading, writing, and adventures with family and friends. Bright Eyes, Bushy Tail, and The Nutty Narrows Bridge is her debut picture book. Currently, she and her husband are living in Spokane, Washington. Donna, welcome to Magical Books for Kids. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Well, first of all, let's first talk about your childhood. Were there any particular books as you were growing up that of interest to you? In my sense, when I was a kid, I only read sports books. And I didn't diversify until I got older. But what about yourself as you were a young child? What did you love to read?
I actually did read a fair amount of animal storybooks, including Black Beauty. And I actually wrote animal stories as a child, too, about horses.
What's the earliest story that you remembered writing as a child?
I don't remember the title, but I had a Palomino horse in the story and a quarter horse. And my friend drew the pictures. And we would write stories of adventures that we would go on. It's the life we wanted to be living.
So you're a natural storyteller because you were starting very young and you utilize your love of animals. Is that the way it all springboarded for you?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I've always been, and as you said, as I got older, of course, I diversified my reading list. But yeah, I've always liked stories, and I think our brains are naturally wired to stories.
Were there any particular authors that you love to read? Some of the authors that I've spoken to over the past 6 months, they mentioned the series types of books, like the Nancy Drew books, things like that. Was there any particular type of books, or was there a particular author that you were attracted to?
A series of books. I like Kuntz. I loved his Odd Thomas books. Mm-hmm. And some of his other stuff I liked, but mostly the Odd Thomas books.
So as a young girl, and of course you started reading and everything, was that a main part of your recreation time? I mean, obviously we all had to go to school. Some of us enjoyed it, some of us didn't. I wasn't too particularly thrilled because my mind was always wandering. My imagination was going somewhere else as opposed to trying to learn about math and physics and things like that. Was there any particular thing that got you going as far as a child?
Any particular thing that
as far as what the outside interests, the recreational time, I usually spent it playing sports. So naturally, my thing was going to read sports books. You mentioned animals. Were you around a lot of animals? Did you take care of animals? Did you have pets?
I did have a dog and a cat, but it was more that I just really wanted to be around a lot of animals. And I also, as far as other recreational activities, I did campfire, rode bikes, volunteered a lot in the neighborhood.
Right. So in that sense, how would you categorize your childhood? For me, it was always, I guess, growing up in the 60s, and I'm dating myself, my mom had this dinner bell, and we were told to go outside, and when she rang the dinner bell was meant when you come in for dinner. So we were not seen by our parents until the dinner bell rang. How was your childhood? I grew up in Queens, which is a borough of New York City, so it was more a city type of situation. What about yourself?
I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is now a touristy type place, very beautiful on the lake. And my parents were a lot like yours. I grew up with my dad, my stepmother, and like 9 siblings. So we were a big family, and mom would shoo us out. And she didn't ring a dinner bell, but she did. If we were hanging out in the house, she found chores for us to do. So we figured out pretty early that we better find something to entertain ourselves with.
I was gonna say, if that was the case for me, I'd be out of the house forever. I would never come back to
Right?
do with chores and everything. So, well, let's talk about your book. It's your first picture book. Uh, First of all, how long did it take you? Can you explain the process that you went through? Some people do it real quick. Others people it takes a while. What about yourself?
It took me a while. It went through a couple of revisions. Basically, what happened was, my husband and I love taking day trips, and we like odd things.
Yeah.
And so we had heard about the Squirrel Bridge, and we thought, let's go see it. So we went down there to see it, and we just fell in love with Longview and the people. It was a fantastic little town, and I wanted to buy a picture book of the bridge. I mean, I'm a teacher. I thought, I have kids. I wanted a picture book. There wasn't one. I couldn't believe there wasn't one. They have a big squirrel fest every year. I went to the library. I asked the librarian there, the children's librarian. She said, there isn't one. And I'm like, wow, we need to fix that. So then I decided that I would write it. And I did that, the rough draft, pretty quick. It got revised. I spent some time finding an illustrator. The book was supposed to come out last year, but then COVID hit.
Right. Well, that kind of
So
derails. Yeah. Mhm.
So I feel like I'm like Groundhog's Day repeating the stuff that we did last year, but it's been fun.
Right now, you mentioned you're a teacher. What particular grade do you teach, and is there any particular subjects that you focus on?
Well, currently I'm not teaching. When I did teach, I was teaching grade.
Okay. And now, as far as the book is concerned, you mentioned, of course, the situation with your kids. Did they read the book first? Did they give you any feedback to you, or did you have somebody? I'm sure your husband gave you feedback, correct?
Yes, family members are great for feedback. And, people are always saying family members are, going to just tell you they love it. It's fantastic. That's not the case with my family. They're pretty honest. They're like, hi. So the one person who did love it was the final version. I read it to my great grandson, Michael, and he loved the book, and he liked it a lot. He's a bit fickle. He's already moved on to other picture books, but
Yeah, that's typical kids, right? They see one and then they're on to the next one, and that's the way they do it. It's much like TV shows, I guess.
right.
So okay, so this particular place that you found, I guess this is the picture book that's inspired by this particular trip that you took, correct? You took this day trip in a kind of
Is there a particular place?
the particular place that you were mentioning about.
Yeah.
Yes. So that inspired you. Where is that located? Is that far from you, or is that within the state of Washington, or is it somewhere else?
Yes, it's in the state. It's about the central area of Washington. It's actually relatively close to Mount Rainier. So, you can drive across the state in 6 hours. So it's about middle. It
Okay.
takes about a 5-hour drive from Spokane.
Okay. So when you're taking this trip, you're not actually planning to write a particular book, right, about this area. It just happened that way.
Yes, it just happened that way. I think it was only in your state that I happened to see an article about this Squirrel Bridge and how it became famous. It was visited all over the world, and I had not heard of it. Lived in Washington, almost like forever. So I thought, we're going to go to Mount Rainier. We should stop in and see this bridge.
Okay. So now some of the questions that you had shown me, and this is one of the most interesting ones, is when is Squirrel Fest? First of all, what is Squirrel Fest and when is Squirrel Fest?
Oh boy, Squirrel Fest. Squirrel Fest started, I believe, about 10 years ago. And it is a celebration of this bridge. It's the third Saturday every August of every year, except for last year. And every year they feature a new bridge. They have a big reveal ceremony, and they put up a new Squirrel Bridge. I think currently in Longview there is 8. I want to say 8 bridges now. And the Nettie Narrows Bridge, the first one, was designed after the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So it's like a squirrel replica of that bridge.
Okay, so these squirrel bridges, this is, you can tell them from the city. I don't understand this stuff. These are bridges for squirrels to cross certain areas. Is that what it's for?
Right. You know,
pretty cool.
As animals, you know, as we move into their territory and habitat, a lot of their habitat gets divided by busy roadways and things like that. And of course, it's a danger to the animals, but also to people. And Amos Peters, the builder of the bridge, they enjoyed going out in their courtyard at lunchtime and feeding the squirrels, but the squirrels were in danger of being hit by cars. Many of them were. So he wanted to find a way that he could do that and not have the squirrels be hurt. And he built the bridge. He built the Nettie Narrows Bridge. His company was a construction company. He built it out of using all recyclable materials. And I think the original bridge cost like $1,000 back in 1963. Wow.
So this is a while ago, this particular bridge was built. And I'm sure the squirrels are thriving with the particular bridge. I think that's just such a neat little thing. I'd never heard of a squirrel bridge. So this is the whole inspiration behind your book.
And the animal bridges now, they have tunnels, animal overpasses. So now it's a real big thing. But Amos Peters was the first person ever to build the Squirrel Bridge.
Wow, how cool is that? And I'm sure he's been immortalized now with your particular book, right?
Yeah, well, and he you know, Mr. Peters has since passed. He's no longer with us, but I think his granddaughter is the representative of the family. Everything I've been able to learn about him, he's just a fantastic guy.
Yeah, what a fascinating story. And you found it because you took a trip, you know, one of those spontaneous trips, and it sounds like you take a lot of those trips.
Right.
Now, have you taken any recently or ones in the past that you wouldn't mind doing a book about that as well?
You know, I'm thinking about that. The next book I've got planned is actually I have 2 in mind. One is about a conversation that my daughter had with a double amputee vet about war and gratitude. And it has a working title of Thank You, Mr. Jack. And the other is, I don't know if you've heard of Kellogg, Idaho, but it's nearby, and it is a mining town. My dad worked at the Bunker Hill mine forever, which was the largest silver mine in the world. And it was discovered by a prospector and his mule. By accident.
By accident. Wow.
By accident. Basically, Noah Kellogg went to sleep and his mule wandered off with his supplies. And he woke up, he had to go find this mule. And when he did, he was standing on the Bunker Hill silver mine, the largest.
Wow. Now you talk about luck. I got to get myself a mule. Maybe I'll have some more luck. Maybe they'll find me some gold somewhere or something like that. You know, that's a great story. You know, and your as you say, your dad, right? Your dad worked in this particular mining area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And my dad.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
My dad was like kind of a jack of all trades. He was an electrician, and so he worked at Bunker for several years, like I think like 20 some.
Yeah, so he did it sounded like he could do anything. and just as long as he was able to put the meals on the table. That's what sounds like the kind of dad that you have, right?
Right. I think him and Amos Peters would have had a lot in common. It's like, okay.
He sounds such a they're both your father and Amos. Sounds like fascinating people that, geez, we'd love to sit around a campfire and just listen to them talk about the stories about what they did with their lives as well. So very interesting. And you brought it all to life.
That's sort of I love, that's what my direction, my theme in writing books is I think these people are all around us in the neighborhood. I think that everybody has people like that. We just need to get out and meet them and listen to them.
Right, sort of like everyday heroes. You don't hear anything about them, but
Exactly.
but a person like yourself has done that, has given attention to somebody like that, and I'm sure the granddaughter's probably thrilled. I would assume.
I agree. I think that I know your show is magic everywhere, and I think that there's interesting people with stories everywhere. There's stories all around us. We just need to find them and listen to them.
Now, how many bridges are there currently? Is there a particular number or a defined number?
Pardon, what?
How many bridges are there currently?
There's 8.
Is 8.
There's 8
Okay.
bridges in Longview at the current time.
Right, and you said that sometimes they add one every so often.
Every year.
Every year. So geez, so every year. So do you know what the bridge is going to be this year or next year?
I don't know what it will be, but I'm going to be there, so I'll find out when they do the big reveal.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that this is for the squirrels, and you mentioned that now there are other bridges or tunnels for animals to pass safely without worrying about vehicles approaching them or anything like that. Do you see that as a movement that's growing, since we're very animal conscious now, I think, in this country?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a big field. And I think Canada just recently did one for big animals to cross a busy highway, an overpass with green grass. They're getting more and more advanced all the time. I think we need to do things like that if we're going to live in harmony with our animal friends.
That's true. They were here actually probably before us, so we're just renting out the real estate here for now. And they've been here for a while. I mean, I remember seeing I think it was on YouTube or Facebook. There was a viral video. It was showing an underneath tunnel somewhere. I think it was Florida, actually. It was here in Florida. And they were showing all the animals that were going. It had a camera on it. And all these different animals came through, whether it was a bear, whether it was like a leopard or something. All these it was pretty amazing to see the amount of animals, types of animals that were going through this particular tunnel. You don't realize how inhabited we are with it. They just don't show themselves to us because obviously, we aren't the particularly nice type of people that they want to run into. So it's interesting that the book that you wrote about sort of is like part of this whole particular movement. So I think it's pretty wonderful that you decided to address this.
Yeah.
So, is there a particular book, that you haven't written that you thought about for many years? I tell this story real quickly. I was homeless and I ended up riding the train and I ended up writing parts of my first novel. I put it aside for 2 decades and I finally decided to do it again, and it was picked up by Simon & Schuster. Now, I'm not saying that you have to wait for 2 decades to do a particular book that you want to do, but is there a particular book, is there a book in mind besides children's books, or is there something that you'd love to write and you haven't gotten to, but you really want to do it?
Yeah, actually, my husband and I started an adventure a few years ago, and it was going to be a travel memoir, like a literary tour of the U.S. And we basically we would read a novel and then we would go visit a place based upon that novel. We did complete the Western states, but then my husband had some health issues. And then COVID hit. And so that just kind of got put on hold, but it is something I would very much like to continue and do that and do that book. I have seen other people who have done sort of like that. But
Well,
that
it's coming
particular,
from your standpoint, so it's going to be unique. Now, when you do take these trips, who does the driving, or do you split it?
who does the driving?
Yeah, who does the driving?
Oh, my husband's the chauffeur.
Is he?
He's the chauffeur.
Yeah, yeah. When I was taking all the long trips and everything, we go from Long Island to Florida and all these different places. I had to drive because it was the only way I could keep myself focused, So I was just wondering if your husband was the one who does the driving and everything like that. So you're sort of like the gut. You're like you keep track of them.
Yeah, I actually don't even have a driver's license.
No, you don't.
So he's definitely the chauffeur.
Yeah, that'll be a little difficult. You don't want to do that, right?
It's like Tolkien said, all who wander aren't lost, but sometimes we actually are lost.
Now, do you have we're talking to children's author Donna Howard, and her first picture book, Bright Eyes, Bushy Tail, and the Nutty Narrows Bridge is really a fascinating idea for a book and everything. And it's about bridges being built for animals. This particular one for the squirrels back in 1963. I believe that's the year. And to me, that's a fascinating. Now, is there a particular part of the book that you really love? I mean, there's parts of the book that I love in my books and everything like that, but there's one particular book, a part of the book that you say, I nailed it. This is great.
This is probably my illustrator, but
Where did you find your illustrator? Because I've heard some fascinating stories with following illustrators. Our illustrator for The Lizard Who Loves a Blizzard is in Cuba, and then our other book, our illustrator, she was in Romania. So it's interesting how people find an illustrator. Now, how did you find your illustrator?
In one of my author groups, actually, and Jill actually is from Taiwan. And she came here in 2000 to go to university. And my favorite illustration that she did is she shows Chester as he starts to run across the street, which, nervous, mind-boggling. He makes it, but she shows him turning white as a ghost. He's like in the middle of the street going, and he's all white. He was brown when he started across.
Right. Yeah, sure.
So I think that's probably one of my favorite illustrations in the book.
Okay. Now, what's the takeaway or the lesson that you want to convey to children? What do you hope children will gain by reading it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. We talked about how there's stories all around us, and we just have to find these people are in our neighborhood. But more than that, when Mr. Peters built the bridge, he had no idea that it was going to become famous, that it's going to be this big celebration. It was just a little act of kindness. His goal was simply for himself and others to be able to enjoy feeding the squirrels and not see them get hurt. So my message to kids is when you're kind and helpful, who knows what can happen? Big things can happen. So, every little kindness you put out in this world is going to come back and grow. So I would just encourage you all to be kind and helpful. Use your talents.
That's a perfect way to end this. Now, where would people find this book? Is this book that we can find? Is it on Amazon? Is it on Barnes & Noble? Where online can people find this book?
The book is on Amazon, and will soon be on Barnes & Noble's and Target website, I believe. There are places, retail locations in Longview, and but for probably easiest for right now, just to go to Amazon.com, and the book is up there.
I've been seeing a lot of authors. They've been putting up hardcover copies. Now, did you do that, or are you staying with the soft cover version for now?
What was the question?
I see a lot of authors. What they're doing is they not only have Kindle, they also have a soft cover version, and they also have hardcover. I see a lot of them now producing hardcover books. Are you doing that yourself, or are you staying with the soft cover, and are you are you having it available for Kindle?
We do have an ebook. It is on KU. And we have the softcover book. And I want to do a hardcover book. I would like to have one out in time for Christmas.
Yeah, it's just I guess the expense is the big part, right? That's what it
It
comes
is.
down to. It's much more expensive. You have to charge more as well. Though it is good for kids because the kids handling the hardcover books, it's more durable for sure as opposed to softcover. So I've been fascinated seeing that. And how has been your experience with Amazon? Was that an easy thing to do, or was it a learning process that you had to go through as well?
Well, I am not technologically
Well,
inclined,
you and me, okay? So
but luckily my son is, and I hired a marvelous book designer, Travis Peterson, and he's fantastic. All I had to do is literally upload the book, and there it was.
well, that's great. I mean, it's good to have a good support system, especially technology-wise. So I have that as well because, like you, I'm not, to me, I'm just trying to keep up what's going on today, as opposed to all these new things that you have to learn, or the latest Windows version, or the latest iPhone, that type of thing. It just sometimes it
Right.
muddles my brain. My brain doesn't have much more room left.
It's great though. It keeps us young, and
Yeah.
I mean, I started with Instagram. I knew Facebook, so I thought, well, let's check out Instagram. And just about the time I was going to sign up, there was like, oh, everybody's going to Reels. And I'm like,
gosh,
Reels? What's Reels?
It's another thing to learn. Oh my goodness, there's so many things. Yeah, it's a what's the latest thing, that type of thing. So, oh boy. Well, Donna Howard, I want to say thank you so much for joining us here for Magical Books for Kids. The title of the book is Bright Eyes, Bushy Tail, and the Nutty Narrows Bridge, a very unique debut picture book. Congratulations on, first of all, such a wonderful subject, and congratulations on seeing it through. You are a published author. Celebrate you.
Thank you.
We hope that you join us again for another edition of Magical Books for Kids. This podcast, as well as any podcast, is available free on all platforms. Again, I'm Michael John Sullivan. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to Magical Books for Kids, a podcast sponsored by Magic Everywhere INC, a company based in Florida, hosted by Michael John Sullivan. This is your place to hear the very best children's stories and an opportunity to get to know your favorite authors. Join us for another fun storytelling podcast next week.